So I didn't grow up in the church. So one of the things that confused me the most when I got into the church world was I'd spent time the previous years around business people. And being around business people, what I loved was the passion and the drive and the focus and the creativity and the ingenuity and just the grit. But then when I was 25, 26 years old, I'd gone to Australia. I lived there for a year, came back. And when I came back, my future wife and I, we started a church and started getting around a lot of church people. And I was blown away at how radically disciplined the business person was willing to be in their pursuit of, not always, but in their pursuit of comfort and money and status. And as they pursued that, not all business people are like that. There's a lot of business people that are pursuing Christ. They're pursuing philanthropy. They're pursuing I understand that. But most of the business people I was around, that's not what they were pursuing. They weren't pursuing a greater good. They were pursuing their greater good. They weren't pursuing God's kingdom. They were pursuing building theirs. But then I get into the church world, and you have all these people that say they're building God's kingdom, but they weren't disciplined. They weren't willing to fast. That was around business people that were willing to fast more for their physique than Christians that were willing to fast for the salvation of souls, like the one thing that we're supposed to care about. And so it was one of the things that I found so intriguing about John Wesley and his movement was he was so rigidly disciplined, but he also expected it out of any leader, any person that was going to be inside of the Methodist movement. He expected this out of them. So they were practicing things like communion. They were practicing things like fasting. He said, I fear there are now thousands of Methodists, so-called, both in England and Ireland, who, following the same bad example, have entirely left off fasting, who are so far from fasting twice a week that they do not fast even twice in a month. And then he said, the man who never fasts is no more on his way to heaven than the man who never prays. Fasting has been this essential piece of the Christian faith before there was a Christian faith, when it was Judaism, fasting is just this central piece of who we were that allowed us this insane amount of access to the Father, that allowed us to empty ourselves and to focus. And he was so disappointed inside of the movement because people had stopped fasting. They had stopped putting their focus and their emphasis on all these disciplines, and they just started doing what they felt like was best or what they felt like doing. And they started to cast off all these different things that made this massive difference inside their faith. But then also the rest of the world looks at that and they see people Paul said, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave. What else could that mean other than discipline? I know that there is this goal that I'm after, so I will do whatever it takes. I don't care if it's fasting. I don't care if I have to spend hours a day on my face in prayer. I don't care how long I have to go without food. I don't care if it's communion and taking communion in this way where it's just worshipful and pure and I'm focused. Whatever it is, give me all of it because I'm on a mission and I have something to do. I have somewhere to go. And there is this thing that God put in me that He designed me to do. I will do whatever it takes to go there and to be more like Him. So I'm going to follow the practices of Jesus. I'm going to do the things that He was willing to do, whether it's comfortable or not. But we've gotten so trapped in this idea of comfort and what feels good, and we pursue that, and we build our own little cushy kingdom, and we completely forget about bringing His to earth. So that was what, for me, one of the major things that set this early Methodist movement apart was that high expectation that he had for these leaders inside of this movement. And one of the pieces that we put in this chapter, so if you've been reading along, following along, this is chapter 6 of Box Wine and Bad Ideas. So my friend Adam Munchell and I have been writing this series. We wrote a book and put it out in a series of articles that you can read for free. It's linked in the description below. But as we've been writing this, this was one of the things that stuck out the most inside of this movement. But one of the pieces inside of the discipline that I loved as we were writing and researching this was the 22 questions that John Wesley and his followers would ask on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And so we've referenced it a few times in the writing over the first 5 chapters. But we actually, in this chapter, we put the 22 questions in there. And some of these questions are things like, am I consciously or unconsciously creating the impression that I'm better than I really am? In other words, am I a hypocrite? Number 2, am I honest in all my acts and words, or do I exaggerate? 3, do I confidently pass on to another what was told to me in confidence? 4, can I be trusted? 5, am I a slave to dress, friends, work, or habits? 6, am I self-conscious, self-pitying, self-justifying? 7, did the Bible live in me today? 8, do I give it time to speak to me every day? You get the point. 9, am I enjoying prayer? He cared about the small details. He even we talk about in this chapter, the punctuality that he expected. He expected people to be on time. It was these little details, because every little detail mattered inside of his faith and the way that he wanted to focus on God and what he saw in the disciples and what he saw in Jesus. So he continued to practice those things and continued to teach them. And I think it was a centerpiece inside of this movement, because the rest of the world could look at anybody that was calling themselves a Methodist, or anybody that was closely following Wesley and his teachings and following Scripture, that these were some of the most serious, disciplined people on the planet, because they genuinely believe in where they're going and what they're doing. They genuinely believe in the good that they can bring inside the world. And I think that is what our discipline shows to people around us.